In today's online class, we'll be working through the surface portion of the program, or at least the beginning stages of the surface program. We'll go through importing some data in that we've done where we've done our survey. We'll talk about some of the different views that are available, and we'll go through some basics on how to do a basic drawing and design, and we'll talk about how to verify that design and then how to send it back out to the FMX to do the actual install work. All right, the project we've got we've got a few things loaded into it, primarily for the class that we get into on Wednesday when we get into start doing some things with pipe sizing and those kind of things. But for today's class, at least, we're just got basically a pretty much a blank project here to work with. To read in the data, the first thing we're going to want to do is once you've got your USB from your FMX where you've went out and done your survey, or you've got whatever data you're going to use, we need to get that into the program. We have added some options so that if you aren't using an FMX to do your survey, you know, whether you're using a planter monitor or something else that has RTK quality, is going to be the key, that it does have to have the RTK quality. We can use that data as well, but we're going to use the option to bring the data in from an FMX, where we use the FMX to do the survey itself. The process of bringing the data in is we're going to go to the Read Job Data button here, or you can go to the File menu and choose Read Job Data, either one of those. We're going to scroll down and choose our Trimble and then our FMX display. Then we're going to need to browse to the location of where that data is at. Now I've got a folder here, it should be on my desktop here, called Class Data. And inside that I just need to select the Ag GPS folder that has the data that we've brought in. You'll see that there's both a planting data here and a yield data here, but all we're going to need to choose is just our planting data because we did our survey at the same time that we did our planting. Click OK. It does give us a couple options here on a couple soybean varieties. I'm just going to go ahead and link those to ones that already exist just to kind of speed the process up here. And it's going to set up, but in this case it is a new field. We're going to go ahead and let it set up a Doug Chaffer client, Chaffer Douglas as a client, Doug Chaffer Farms, field 13, and you see the program is going to set that up as a new field. So go ahead and click OK there. Now when we go over to our management tree on the left-hand side, if we open up our client, our farm, and our field, you'll see we've got our topographic layers, and that's the first one we're going to look at here. So if I double click on that topographic layer, it's going to bring up all of our survey points from the field. We've got a legend down here in the bottom right hand corner that shows us what our colors are for that. We've got and it even shows you how many data points fall within each of those color ranges there. You'll see it also gives us indications if we've got any benchmarks or any master benchmarks. And you'll see our master benchmark here is indicated by the star up here in this top right-hand corner, the northeast corner there of the field. Some of the other views that we have available, if we go down here and click our plus sign on our elevation, you'll see we've got three primary views under elevation there. The base data, which is our point data. We can also look at our watershed map. That's going to show you where the basic watersheds fall within that field, the natural drainage watersheds, and probably more importantly is the topography view there. The topography view is going to take all of that point data and kind of smooth it out and make it a little easier to look at type map. Now, one thing you will have, if you haven't done it already, if you didn't have a field boundary for the field, you could draw that field boundary in. You could use the auto draw features to get that done as well. But you will need to have a field boundary to go ahead and continue on through the process here of working with the topography and then ultimately the drainage planned layers as well. So with our topography view up here, we do have a few other tools that we can turn on and off as needed. The first one of those would probably is going to be our contour lines. So if we go above our map to our display options button, and we can go in here, we can tell it what we want to turn on. The tributary lines, we'll look at that one first. The tributary lines are predicted channels of drainage based off of the topography data that we have. The minimum volume is a relative number. The smaller that number is, the more tributary lines you're going to see on the screen. The higher that number is, you're going to see just your primary tributaries coming off of that field. So if I leave that set at 10 and click OK, you see that we've got quite an extensive, detailed depiction of all the different tributaries for the field. If I go back to that, and I'm going to bump that number up to 200 this time, and at that point you can kind of get a pretty good indication of where your main drainage channels for that field are located. You kind of got a natural cleft that falls down through the center of the field from south to north, and then it actually drains off. It naturally drains off here to a common point here in the kind of that northeast corner of that field, which works out really well because there's a county tile that runs just to the north of this field that we can tie into. We can kind of use that drainage to our advantage, tie a good majority of that field right into the county tile there, and then we could run another drainage line along this side to pick up the water that's coming off of this little hill slope here, and actually this runs off naturally downhill to actually a ditch that runs out into about the middle of this next field here. It's about where that actual natural ditch is, to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at there in general with where this field is located. Other options that we've got here, if we want to see flow arrows, if we can go ahead and turn the flow arrows on. Again, just another tool that we can use to show where the natural surface drainage of that field is going to naturally flow the water. So you can, again, you get a better depiction here, as we hit off the top here of this ridge. You can see the water is going to flow both ways, and then obviously there's kind of an area right in through here where there's a break of which direction that water is going to flow, whether it's going to flow to the west or whether it's going to flow to the east naturally. And again, we can use that to our advantage as we're doing our design to help lay out a design that's going to, going to work the best for us. With the flow arrows, the more that you zoom out, the fewer arrows you get. And obviously, the more that you zoom in, the more flow arrows you're going to get there to kind of get a better detailed idea of what's going on with which direction that water is going to flow. You can turn those on in combination. So if you want to turn on the tributaries and the flow arrows, you can turn those on at the same time. And then the other option we've got here is our contour lines. The contour lines are basically going to allow you to see what you would normally see on a topography type map. And we can set our breaks on where we want that to fall. I know this field is fairly flat, and if we look at our legend there, you can see that legend is the field is fairly flat. So I'm going to tell it to make a major contour line every 2 feet and a minor contour line every 1 foot. The only requirement here is that the minor has to divide evenly into the major. So for example, you could not use a 3 foot on a major and a 2 foot on a minor. The program wouldn't be able to divide that out evenly and make that work. But in our instance here, a 2 and a 1 will work just fine. It's going to put a dark line every 2 foot elevation change and a lighter colored line every 1 foot elevation change. So you can see here as we drop off the top of this hill, we drop 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. We only drop about 4 feet to get out to the middle of that field, kind of where that lowest lying spot is within that field. Closer together those lines are, obviously the steeper your slope. So you can see in this area over here where we're dropping off here to the west that our lines are fairly close together, so we're going to have a little bit more slope there that we can naturally use to our advantage to pick up the water coming off that west edge of the field. We can set that in decimals, so if we want to see more detail, we can set this at 1/2 foot. And now we've got a contour line every 6 inches as we're looking at the field then. Again, that can be turned on in combination with the tributary lines, or it can be turned on in combination with the flow arrows. You can turn all of them on. To me, that map just gets way too busy. Typically what I would, once I've kind of got a general layout of the field, may turn on the flow arrows and the contour lines at the same time. Or typically, a lot of times, you may just go with just the contour lines. So you've got a little bit of an idea where things lay there. You could also use just the tributary lines as a basis on kind of where to get started with that field, whichever works best for you. I just wanted to show you a lot of the different options there. The only other view that we've got here that's a little bit different, really kind of useful for those of you who where one person may go out and do the survey work and another person may be working on doing the design work, as we can display this in the 3D mode. And by selecting it in the 3D mode, we can go ahead and turn on our contour lines here again. And now we can exaggerate this map out with our scale a little bit. And now if we rotate the map, we can actually see that field in 3 dimensions. So we can really see where those highs, where those lows are. If we exaggerate it out even more, you can really see those highs and lows. So you can rotate that map up, down. You can move left to right and rotate it. If you want to zoom in on a specific area, you can use your mouse and roll up on that to get a zoomed in view as well. So the 3D view, again, just another tool that we have that we can use to kind of get a better depiction of, again, another overview of what's going on. And like I said before, you can really see this, kind of see this when we exaggerate that out there. You can really see that low ground that lays in the middle of the field here that we can use to our advantage to help with that layout. And over on the west side here, you can see that how much more steeply that drops off than the rest of the field. So again, the 3D view is another tool that you can use as needed to do your design work. As we're ready to, we'll start into the actual design work itself at this point. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go over here and indent it underneath the field. You see the program automatically creates a drainage plan layer. If I go ahead and double left click on that drainage plan layer, it puts it down into our displayed layers, at which case I can either hit my edit button there, or if you just do a right click and choose edit layer, it's going to bring up our edit mode on that drainage plan layer. The left hand side now you'll notice has changed, and it's giving us all of our design parameters for doing the design itself. We have the option to show in feet and inches if you would rather see everything in feet and inches rather than decimal. So again, depending upon your personal preference there, you could choose that. You notice when we do that, now we get feet and inches listed here. Or if you just want to leave it as decimal feet, you can uncheck that box. The modify connection offset and auto update connecting sections are primarily going to be used as we get a little further along in the design work, so that if we make a change to for example, we've drawn in a main and we've drawn in some laterals and we decide that, well, maybe we need to go back and tweak that main a little bit, it'll go back through, by having the auto update connected sections, it'll go back through and automatically update all of the laterals as well. So we don't have to go back through and redo or redesign those laterals. It'll update those with the information as we go. And the modify connection offset is automatically going to help with doing the connections from where one pipe ties into another by choosing the option to automatically modify those. By automatically doing that, just again speeds up the process of the design work itself and allows for the process to go a little quicker. As we move on down the box here, we'll kind of talk about a few things and we'll come back and use them a little bit later on. We got to verify the entire design. Basically, once you get the design drawn for the field, you can click on that verify design and it'll go through and check everything, make sure everything falls within the parameters that you've set up for each of the different lines. The auto pipe sizing, we're actually going to spend some time in Wednesday's class going through the auto pipe sizing and using the auto pipe sizing to create our pipe sizes and tell us what is recommended based off of our spacing and based off of some of our coefficients and those kind of things that we have set up there. Once we get everything kind of set up, we can use the filter option there to go through and see what type of, which lines we might have errors on or what have you. Or we can go through and select a specific section line and it'll start to flash on our screen. And as we start setting up the lines, all of these next sections will fill in for us. Once we draw a line, we can enter in the minimum, maximum depth. But what I usually like to do is go here to the bottom first and use the set defaults. By using the set defaults, it's going to set all of our parameters here for us. So what I usually do is I'll set them up with whatever the parameters are I want on my lateral. So if I go to my lateral here, enter in my minimum, my maximum, my optimal depth. So my optimal depth may be 3.8 feet, maximum depth at 5.5 feet. outlet depth 3 feet. Outlet to optimal, we'll talk about that in a little bit, and as well as the connection offsets as well. But once I get my my default set up, that'll save me from having to go in and enter all of those on every line. It'll remember those defaults, and as you enter in a new line, it'll pick up those defaults and apply them to that new line that's drawn. I guess at this point we'll go ahead and we'll start to draw in some lines here. To do the drawing itself, we're going to go to our lines tool here, and you'll notice to the right of it there is a drop-down list where you can tell what type of line you're wanting to draw. So we're going to start off with a main, and wherever we click to start is where the program's going to put the outlet. So I know we need to have an outlet for this field over here in this general area, and I'm actually pretty well going to follow the tributaries here, the tributary that's set up for this field, just to again, to give us a place to start. And once I did my right click and finish, you'll see it's drawn in that line. It's marked our outlet. It did give us an exclamation point on the end of it there, letting us know that there is an issue with that line. So if I select that line and I go down to my profile tab, it tells us what our issue is, or at least shows us where our issue is. Basically, it can't achieve the maximum depth, or the minimum depth, basically, on this line, and that's primarily because since this is our main, our outlet is actually deeper than 3 feet. You see our default outlet depth fell in there at 3 feet, and actually I know the outlet on this feet, that county tile, is 5.5 feet down there, or where I need to be at the edge of the field is 5.5 feet down at least. And now if I click my update button, that works out really well for us, and that is going to pick up our minimum slope primarily all the way across the field there. You see the last 100 feet, which is our outlet to optimal, as where it's going to drop off that additional that it needs to get down there to the 5.5 feet where we need to be to tie into that county tile. Now we can change this outlet to optimal, so if we make this 200 feet and click our update button, you see how it's increased our distance from the end, that it starts to do that final drop off. Again, decreasing our slope. Again, totally up to you how you want to set that up. Some guys will come back and they'll put it in at 50 feet so they don't have to dig as deep. They may have a sharper drop off there at the end, but they don't have as far to dig back from that outlet to get that done. A lot of guys I've worked with, 100 foot seems to be a good starting point on most of their lines there. As we look at the rest of our information here that we have for the line, you'll see where our minimum, our maximum have all filled in for us. Our minimum slope is filled in as well. If we want our minimum slope, maybe we want it to be 12.5%, or 0.125 instead of just a tenth. We can go ahead and we can enter that in there as well. See, the program did round it up to 0.13, but it is actually using that 0.125 that we had entered in there. The other thing we need to fill in up here is our drainage width, basically how far out on each side, or how much area that tile is going to pick up. So if we're running a perforated tile there, we want to go ahead and fill in whatever our lateral width typically is what you're going to fill in for the drainage width. Additional area is going to allow for the program to account for any additional water that's going to be pushed into this. So if we've got maybe part of another field that lies to the south of this that's also going to push water into this main, we can fill in that additional area there. And then where that comes into play is as we're using the auto pipe sizing, that would help account for that, to increase the size for any additional area that's being put into that as well. We can choose our pipe from our drop-down list. You'll see this project, I don't have any project pipe sizes set up yet, so I can use the add option there. And we're just going to say we'll put in an 8-inch main here. Count is going to fall under, we'll just put it under miscellaneous supplies. That's going to tie into how it ties into the accounting. And then from our type drop-down list, we need to choose what it is there. So I'm going to go down here and choose dual wall 8-inch. And we can choose our purchased unit. So if we buy that by the roll, and I don't know for sure, but maybe on a roll of 8-inch, there's 1,200 feet. And we can enter in the cost there at cost per roll at We'll put $500 in there for now. Now we can also enter in a minimum length, so that's the minimum amount of that tile that would be used in any section. So if you don't want to ever go under 25 feet, you could do that as well there. And then the color is what's going to be used on all of the layers, no matter which field you're working with for that tile. And we'll go ahead and leave that at green. So I'll go ahead and select OK on that. I click my update button. And now if we go back and look at our pipe, you'll see there's our dark green showing us that tile, that 8-inch pipe that we just put in is 1,467 feet for that. Again, if we want to look at the profile, we can go back and look at the profile. We can click any place on the profile here, and the program will show us where on the tile line that we are. So say, for example, if we had some issues with an error or something like that, we could click on it here to see where we were at on the map, or we can make maybe an adjustment to that line to make it so that that line would flow better as the program calculates the requirements there. Once we've got our main in, I always like to hit the save button whenever I get a section or a portion of a line in that I think is going to work well for us. It gives us the ability, if we don't like what happens next, we can always hit our cancel button, and it'll go back to that last point that we hit our save button. So we'll go ahead and start putting in some laterals here, and we'll put in a lateral here, and we'll say it's going to run. We'll run it off this direction to kind of set up our first lateral there. And now we'll select that and see what's going on with that. Saying we need to have a little bit more depth here. Our depth at the beginning of this is not quite at where we need to be. It's 1/10 of a foot. We can look at some of our options here. Our offset is basically where the two tile lines run together. So where that lateral is tying into the main, it's offsetting that 0.25, or basically a 1/4 of a foot, so 3 inches. Basically a zero offset means that tile is going to hit bottom to bottom. So the bottom of the lateral would hit to the bottom of the main. So in this case, we could reduce our offset. So if we maybe make that 0.15, we update that line. Now you see that line is going to work for us because we reduced the actual offset of where that ties into the main. The other thing I want to do here is I want to go ahead and we'll set up our pipe size here, our drainage width. We're going to say we're going to put our laterals in every 40 feet for this field, and we're going to add in under the pipe size here. Four-inch lateral, miscellaneous supplies, and we'll call that corrugated 4-inch. Purchase it by the roll, 6,400 feet in a roll, and we'll say it's $500 as well. We'll leave our minimum at 0, and we're going to put this in as red. Now we can hit our save button, and we'll say yes. So now we see our red line there, our lateral, our first lateral that we've tied in, and then we've got our main in the green there. If we go back and select our main, you see our profile comes back into view, and now you'll see that first lateral that we've tied in. You'll see that pipe as it's where it's going to hit on that lateral. So it's hitting just above the bottom of that lateral. That's our 0.15 offset that we've got on that line. So we'll see that there as well. Once we've got our first lateral in, we can use that and use the create offset option by doing a right click on the line and choosing create offset. I'm going to tell them I want my lateral spaced every 40 feet. I'm going to tell them I want to add 20 of those. Now the direction here sometimes gets a little confusing, and the best way to think of it is if you're standing at this connection and you're looking out towards down your lateral, which way do you want those additional laterals to be added? And in this case, I want those to go to the right. So if I'm standing here looking down the line, we want those to go to the right. And once I click OK, see the program has added those laterals in. I always add a few more than I think I'm going to need because it's easier to delete them than it is to go in and add more back in. So now I've deleted off those extra laterals. All of them have filled in. You see they have all filled in, and there's only one of them here that has an issue. So if I look at that one, you see we're just a little bit on that one there. We need to get a little bit deeper. I'm going to just reduce my minimum depth there to 2.8 feet on it. and that one now works as well. Hit my save button. Now if I look at my original main there, you can see all of the individual laterals as they're tying into that. If we look at if we go to our different view here, we go to our pipe, you see it's even going to show us the number of feet on each one of those type pipe sizes that we need. From there, we just continue on drawing in the additional lines that we need. For example, I know we might need a sub-main that's going to come in. We'll say it's going to tie in here and actually come up and across to the edge of the field here, so that we can then pick up, do another sub-main to pick up from the end of it and run up along the side of this field. And we'll draw in some more laterals this way. We'll try to draw those in so they kind of pick up the water coming off the other side of this hill. And let's go back and fix these up a little bit. Go make a 6-inch here. And we'll look at this line now. So we need to make some adjustments here. Know the elevation at the end of this, we're right at 3 feet, so we can't change our minimum there, so we need to change either our offset, and actually since this is a 6-inch line that feeds into another 6-inch line, I'm going to go ahead and change my offset to 0 so that those two will come together, flow bottom to bottom. And I'm actually going to drop the minimum slope just a little bit here. I dropped my minimum slope there. Now this one should work as well. And I can, let's set my size. I always want to make sure you've got your size and everything set before you create that offset so that it copies everything across for you there. I'm going to go ahead and hit my save button here again. I've drawn a little bit there and I want to make sure it's going to work for us. So I'm going to do my create offset, and we're going to do 40 feet again, and this time we're going to do 20 of them, and this time we will want to go to the left because we're standing here looking out this lateral, and you see how it's really shortened up those end ones. So in that case, what we might want to do, instead of starting with the first one, we're actually going to go back here. We know where our last few need to be. So I'm going to actually take this line. I'm going to use the extend option to extend that out to the boundary. Makes it a little longer than I need, but I can always cut it off to make it a little bit shorter. So I can go to my cut tool now, and we'll cut this line off and delete it. So now I can take this line. I know it's at the angle I needed because I just extended it. Now I can create the offset, go 40 feet, and we'll do 15 of them to the right. And now it's dropped those lines back across that hill. And now we can kind of come in if we need to go in and cut these, whichever way we want to cut those, and get rid of all of the extras. So if I take my cut tool, and I'm going to cut kind of right up the middle of these here. And now I can go in and delete off these extra portions that I no longer need. If I zoom in, you can see a little bit easier what's going on there. Use my arrow keys to move around, just to basically kind of go through and clean those up. If we wanted to extend these out a little further, I mean, we can choose multiple lines and extend those to the boundary. extend those way on out. Again, then we can go back through and use our cut tool to go through and cut those off so that we don't have as much extra. We don't have the extra hanging out there that we don't really need. Delete those off, and now we've got both sides of that side hill covered. We could do the same thing on this end. Actually, I'm going to hit my save button again, and we'll create some more offsets on this line. We'll go 40 feet, and let's do about 8 more of those, and we will go to the left. So we finished putting those in that direction, and then we can do the same thing here on this end. Create offset 40 feet. Do about 5 of those to the right. Now we've extended those on as well. Again, we got a couple lines here. They're probably a little long. We can go in and trim those off. Pick up those tails, and we'll get rid of those extra tails there. This one, I think it actually isn't actually picking up the connection there. Yeah, it's definitely not there. So we can do a right click and choose connect to. It tells us to select the line we wanted to connect to, and now we've got that line snapped into there. We can do a create offset again, 40 feet, and let's make 3 of them. We want to go to the right, so now those have laid in there as well. And again, we can go back through and take our cut tool and delete off the extra tails there. So it's easier to draw the lines in long and then go back through and delete off what we don't need than it is to go in and draw them short and then try to extend them out. So now we've got basically that half of the field drawn. We would just continue on. There's another another ridge that runs through here that we could drain this direction. The rest of the field we're going to drain off to the west. But once we're done with that, we can hit our save and close. Again, now we can look at our map here at the bottom. You can see how many feet we are just in that portion of the field. We're at 22,000 feet of 4-inch. Got about 1,300 feet, 1,350 of sub-main, and then we've got a main there as well. So that kind of gets you the idea on how to go through the design process. You just continue on with that same process until you get the entire field finished. If we stay in that edit mode, once we get the entire design finished, we can hit this verify design. The program goes through and verifies, again, checks and makes sure there's not any errors with our parameters that we've set up. We can add labels to that. So if we want to add a label to a line, we can right click and choose add label. Maybe we want to add the pipe size. You can see it shows those are 4-inch. We can add a label on this. So you can see this is sub-main. And we can even add the label to that to show that it's a main. If we want to move those labels around to make them a little easier to see, you certainly can do that just by using the text tool, selecting that text label and then dragging it where you would like. Yes, we've talked a little bit about the legend, how we get how the fact that it does show the total number of feet on our pipe here. We switch to the type. You see the program just recolors the line based off of what type the lines are. If we had set up in different phases, so if we wanted to do part of the field in phase 1 and then come back another year and do phase 2, you could get the map to show you the different color of the lines by phase. We've got our drainage width there. That's drainage width is just another check we can use. You see on the sub-main that we laid in there, we did not put our width in on it, so we probably would want to go back and do that if we needed to. Additional areas all 0. We didn't tell it was anything was coming in, and we can even do a length calculated. One thing that a lot of folks ask about and sometimes can get a little messy is if they want to put the length calculated on every line. We can go in while we're in our edit mode. We can add the label. We can add the label to that. If we go to our display options, we can change it over to drainage, or sorry, to our length calculated, and remove the pipe. But you see how if we do that on a lot of lines, if I select all those lines and add the label, you can see how that can get kind of messy, especially when you go to print it out. So again, just caution you that to let you know that is a situation that you can do multiple labels like that, but it can get a little busy if need be. The other thing you can do if you want to print this map out, if you want to print this out for a landlord, for example, maybe let's go ahead and take those. We'll go back to our, let's turn the labels off for now. And maybe we don't want the topographic map in behind it any longer. Maybe we want an aerial photograph in. So let's take those out, bring our drainage plan back up, and then we'll turn on our background imagery for the area. And then the last thing I want to do is we want to go ahead and pull the color out of the field boundary so that you can actually see the topography. And now we've got a map when we go to print that out where we've got just the tile lines that are laying over top of the aerial photograph. Again, so you can kind of verify where things are at within that field and kind of give the landlord or whoever you may be doing the tile work for a better idea of what your plans are for the field. So again, just another option there. It's another option for getting that same, to give you an option for the printout. To print it, all you need to do is just go to the print button here above the screen. I always like the select area option. That gives me control over what area gets printed, so I can pick and choose how much of an area gets printed, how much area around that field gets printed. And now when I use my print selection, I'm missing a logo there, but at least you kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like there. You can see it's going to show you the drainage plan layer, tells you the client to farm the field. In this case, since we were looking at the pipe, it's going to give you a legend based off of the pipe there and tell you how many feet of each of the different pipes is going to be projected for that. Now another report that we've got that you can use, if we go under reports, all reports, field, and then drainage, there is a drainage plan report. If I go under Chaffer Farms here, choose field 13 and click preview, it's going to show us how many rolls based off of our parameters that we set up when we were setting up the supply properties. It's going to tell you how many rolls of each of the supplies you need, what cost based off what you put in, what your supply costs are going to be, as well as your total length, and then it's going to divide that out as a cost per foot. The other thing that this report's going to tell you is how many adapters you need, how many T adapters you need to go from 4-inch to 6-inch, 4-inch to 8-inch, 6-inch. You got a 6-inch T there, or 6-inch elbow. And then you also need a 6 to 8 there, and then any inline adapters that you might need as well. It would give you a rough estimate on how many you're going to need there to get that job finished. So that's just another planned report that you could have there as an option. Once we've got everything done for the field, we've got the entire field done, we've verified the design and everything, to send it back out, you're going to use the file and choose Write Job Data. We'll go back down under our FMX, and go down to Trimble, choose our FMX. We'll browse to our location, so in this case our E drive, and once we click OK, the program's going to go ahead and write that data out for us. That pretty well gets me through everything I wanted to cover.